How about women at other life stages, perimenopause, menopause? I'm sure a huge percentage of the audience that follows you and follows me as well are finding themselves in that category. How should they be thinking about fasting?
Yeah. So there's 3 phases for women. There's the fertility years, there's the perimenopause, and there's the postmenopause. So with the perimenopausal years, this is one that is really delicate. And I really encourage women, you're going to have to find your own unique rhythm with it. But let's sort of set the picture for those women. At 40, what ends up happening is your ovaries are going into retirement. And that doesn't mean you can't have a baby at 43 or 45. But in general, the ovaries are like, okay, like I've done a job here for a very long time, and now I'm going to go into retirement and slowly back out. But I'm going to do 2 things as I go through that process. One, it's going to take me about 10 or 15 years to go into this retirement phase. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions of perimenopause is that we think it's like a switch that goes on and off. That's not the case. It's about a 10-year journey of these decline of hormones. Second thing is because the body's so well designed, what it does is it has to hand over the job of making sex hormones to a different organ. And what it does is it hands it over to the adrenal glands. Now, let's talk about a 45-year-old woman, a 43-year-old woman who's got teenage kids, is balancing work and family, is like maxed out. And now her adrenals have been in high mode, like a high performance mode, and now has to take over the job of making sex hormones. Okay, now those adrenals are very loaded. So I set that all up to say we have to think about the adrenals for the perimenopausal woman as we move through different fasts. Because if you throw a 3-day water fast at a perimenopausal woman, at the wrong time of her cycle, you could put her into a really difficult hormonal state. So what I recommend for perimenopausal women is you really want to get to know the characteristics of your hormones. You want to start tracking your cycle. I'm 53 now. At 43, I started tracking my cycle for the first time. You want to know what day you're on, and then you want to know what hormone is coming in. And when you know those 2 things, which I teach you that in the book, now you know, okay, it's day 10 of my cycle, estrogen's coming in. Estrogen likes keto. Estrogen likes fasting. Estrogen likes my extreme exercise. Great. Let's use that tool. Now, when you get into the back half of your cycle, it's day 22. Okay, now I need to look at progesterone and really nourish progesterone. At 40, as you go into this perimenopausal state, progesterone's just going down, down, down. You're never getting progesterone back to what it was in your 20s. So that back half, you really got to go more into nurture. So it becomes this sort of dance you do with your hormones, but you first have to get to know your cycle, and then you need to get to know the personality of these hormones and what they need from you so that you can really maximize that.
You were sharing that there's a lot of variation during this time, and it's important that you kind of play with it for a woman that finds herself in this stage, this transition stage of 10 to 15 years where the ovaries are going in retirement before menopause. What are some examples, if any, that you could think of from your own life where you kind of thought something was a good idea, but then you found through testing it out, something else worked better for you? Anything come to mind?
Oh, well, fasting this is how I discovered everything that I teach in Fast Like a Girl, was at 43. At 40, I went into 40 wanting to be in the best shape of my life. I did all the right things, and I was working out, and I was eating all day long, and everything clinically was clean in my lifestyle. By 43, I had the worst perimenopausal symptoms ever.
And can you just explain what they were?
Yeah. So trouble sleeping, hot flashes at night, really irritable. My kids, at that point were teenagers, and it was like anything they did just kind of really set me off. Almost became intolerant to stress. A lot of injuries. Like I'm an athlete, and a lot of like knee and hip stuff just wouldn't go away, and it just kept showing up, and lingering injuries. and anxiety. I'd never had anxiety before where like, I'd just be sitting on the couch and like, I just would feel anxious. And my brain was like, what is going on? There's nothing I'm doing. I'm just sitting on my couch. How could I be anxious? And that was the first time I'd ever experienced anxiety before. So that was kind of what I had. And then I discovered fasting. And so what I did is I loved weight gain was another thing that's really common in your 40s. Like all your old tricks are not working anymore. Everything you did in your 30s and 20s to keep your body in great shape, not working anymore.
What was an example of something that you were doing, right, for weight management in particular? Obviously, you've always had a little bit of like a wellness focus. So maybe some of the stuff that people are doing, you're not going to be doing. But was there anything that was an old trick in your book that stopped working for you?
Exercise.
Exercise. So just exercise alone as a vehicle to sort of maintain weight, that in itself was not moving the needle forward.
And so I just started running more. I'm a runner. I love to run. And I would just throw more at it. And the more I threw at it, the harder, the less my body responded positively. It actually started responding more negatively. So then I found fasting and I started throwing fasts at it and longer fasts. And the shorter fast started to move some of the needle for me. I started to see that there was like some weight that was dropping. And then when I started doing it, I threw some 3-day water fasts at it. And I started to see massive weight loss drop. But what I didn't know then was how to vary it to my cycle. I was doing it at the wrong time of my cycle, which is how I came upon all of this.
So let's talk about that personalization piece, because you're known for really providing sort of a bunch of options for people for a fasting journey that can help them towards that goal. And we'll kind of cover a few of those, and we'll come back to maybe, I don't know if there's any additional distinctions you want to share for like women that are in the menopausal years, because we talked about the transition years.
Yeah. Let's talk about because I always get asked these questions, all the postmenopausal women, and I always say, I'm not leaving you out. It's just different. So you don't have a cycle to time to anymore. So, but you still have 3 sex hormones to consider. And these 3 sex hormones are still declining every year of your life. That's how they're naturally supposed to do, what they're naturally supposed to do. So, in the book, I put a 30-day reset in there where a postmenopausal woman can go through different length fasts, different food styles, and we can talk about that in a moment, and kind of just learn to have a rhythm with going into a low keto, coming out into what I call hormone feasting foods, which is a lot of root vegetables and some really healthy carbs, and then going into shorter fasts and then coming out. It's that ebb and flow that a postmenopausal woman still needs to think about. Whereas, if you look at a 60-year-old man who just wants to raise testosterone, he doesn't have as much of that ebb and flow to think about. So you still have these hormones to think about. You just don't have a cycle to time it to.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep, totally.
So what I did is created one for postmenopausal women in the book.
Great.
So
let's jump into some of these fasting as a base entry point. Fasting is one of those things it's kind of like there's a lot of buzzwords that are out there in different categories of, of different industries. For example, there's like, people talk a lot about gratitude and the benefits of gratitude, right? And in the health world, it's like fasting has been, all the rage. But when you actually look at it and you talk to people, like very few people are actually regularly practicing fasting as a part of their regimen. Anybody can kind of like quickly get excited about something and they drop off.
Right.
So as much as it feels like we've been talking a lot about fasting, still I don't really know that many people are incorporating it. It's still the minority of individuals if it's a regular part. It's just been my experience when you talk to people. It's like, oh, I know it's a good idea, but I'm not necessarily doing it. Yeah. Right? That's what I mean by it, right? Yeah. If you go to the general public, we live in the wellness world.
Right, I know.
So there's going to be a higher percentage of people in your comments and your YouTube comments and my podcast comments. But most people, you walk down the street, oh yeah, I've heard of fasting. I heard it's a good thing, but I'm not necessarily doing it.
Right.
So as an on-ramp do you have an entry place where you start people before we get into the different variations that are out there of how to begin to tap into the benefits of fasting?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I hope everybody that's listening that is like, I think it's a good idea, but I haven't started, will start after this conversation, because here's the entry point is you have to start looking at your 24 hours that you're given every single day as there is a window in which you eat and there is a window in which you fast. So I do like the concept that it's time restricted eating, because you're taking your eating and you're putting it in one short window. So when we talk about one meal a day, that's what we're saying is you're just in that window. And when you're eating, you're raising blood sugar. So and then when you're not eating, you're bringing blood sugar down, which is letting you switch into another fuel source. So what I first start doing with people is I say, just push your breakfast back an hour or push your dinner up an hour one day and start to take all the food you're eating and compress it into a shorter time period. And if you naturally do that, you push breakfast back an hour. It may be a little difficult in the beginning. That's okay. It's actually good if it's difficult. It's like going to the gym. Do you want to go to the gym and make it easy all the time, or do you want to actually push yourself to a little bit of an edge so the body can adapt? That's the same thing we're doing as we start to push breakfast back an hour, is you want to hit that hormetic stressor moment where the body is like, okay, this is stressful. And then all of a sudden it starts to kick in and turn on the ketogenic energy system for healing. Then you can push it back another hour till you're right at that intermittent fasting level, which is about 15 hours.
I'd love to chat about this a little bit. I know you've talked about this on your podcast. I've heard a few of the episodes and I've seen some clips on social media. This idea of breakfast. And of course, there's the larger concept that we've always been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and that's sort of being in the zeitgeist for many years. Yeah. And then there was this whole movement of people incorporating fasting and people doing fasting the same way. And often for a lot of people that meant skipping breakfast because it's just an easier way to do things. Yeah. Especially in a society like America, North America, European countries, Western countries, where dinner is a very social kind of component. I grew up in a tradition where fasting, which was a regular part of my parents' life and upbringing for spiritual and religious reasons, often when they fasted, it would be they'd skip dinner. That was the sort of approach they had. And that was kind of just what had been passed down for years. And I've also noticed for my wife and my sisters, again, just a little N of 3 situation that's there, is that they're not hungry right away first thing in the morning. But when they get that morning sunlight, that sort of helps them suppress some of that melatonin that's there, that's lingering in the body. They build an appetite, and at least eating something in the morning, they feel better. Where I can just drink a black coffee like I have here and kind of like go for a period of time. Yeah. My wife will literally tell me, she's like, I cannot focus. I cannot pay attention. I don't feel like I have the energy. Any thoughts about any of that that you want to chime in on?
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on that. So the first thing I would say is I'm an advocate for finding your fasting lifestyle that's unique to you. So in the book, I have a whole chapter on what is a fasting lifestyle. And one of the key things is, what are you trying to do with your fasting? So in that scenario with the women in your life, I would say if you're hungrier in the morning, but not as hungry at the end of the day, then let's take your eating window and put it starting at, maybe you open up the eating window at 9 and you close it at 5. And then you you're fasting the rest of the time. Which
is very socially, it's tough to do.
Right.
For a lot of people, which is why I appreciate the way you've shared it, which is that you have to find your fasting lifestyle.
That's right.
But I genuinely see a performance difference. Again, this is my little corner of the world and just paying attention to a lot of, the people in my life. And I'm lucky to be surrounded by amazing, women. Awesome. But it's great to get your take on that. So everybody has to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, you have to figure it out for yourself. And here's the thing is that what I hear a lot from people who are not fasting is they will say like, that kind of thing. I'm hungry in the morning. I couldn't really go that long without fasting or without eating. And fasting is your natural state. Your body, the human body, whether you're a man or a woman, thrives when you go without food. We have all these healing mechanisms that kick in that you can't get supplements to kick in. You can't get drugs to kick in these mechanisms. So we want to understand what our personal bodies want with this fasting window. And if you're hungry all the time in the morning, but not hungry in the afternoon, or a lot of people do circadian fasting where when it's light out, they eat, and when it's dark, they don't. I think that all of that is great. But if you are going consistently every single day, 7 hours is the longest you go, 8 hours is the longest you go without food, you've completely missed a whole set of healing tools that your body has.
Okay, check this out. I have a free fasting guide for you all. It's free. And it's going to teach you all the basics of fasting. It's going to teach you how to kill hunger when you fast, which is really cool. And it's going to show you how to break your fast, among many other things. All you got to do is click on this link right here and enjoy.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I also noticed for my wife in particular, again, my sisters, they can actually power through, but then it kind of hits them that they don't feel that great if they don't eat a little bit. We're not talking about like a big breakfast, and we're definitely not talking about Kellogg's and some of the other stuff that you've talked about in your podcast, but even a little bit of chicken sausage, some bok choy, some greens, just a little something in the morning, primarily fat, protein, fiber, that is just a little bit of that kick to get the brain, especially because all three of them are like more executive types, and they're in meetings and they're using a lot of cognitive power, and they're not that moms aren't. They're probably even using even more cognitive power that are out there. But yeah, I think it just goes back to everybody sort of figuring out what is their unique window and what can they keep up with.
That's right.
In their life.
That's right.
Because if you can't keep up with it, then you can't tap into the benefits.
Yeah, I'll share a story of a beautiful interaction that I had with a man this summer who came to me, and he was 300 pounds. And he said, I need your help. And he's like, if I don't change my food behavior, I'm going to die. And I have 2 kids and a wife. What can fasting do for me? And when I dove into his food addiction, it was all the worst things. It was the standard American diet. It was like 12 sodas a day. And he had been on every diet. And so I knew I couldn't just say, well, gosh, get rid of your soda. That's an easy answer. I asked him to take all the food he was eating and start to compress it into a shorter eating window. So we did exactly what I taught you. I had him just back breakfast back an hour. And we did that every single day, where we just slowly took all of this horrible food and put it into about an 8 to 10 hour eating window. First month, he didn't change anything. He lost 13 pounds first month. Still drinking all the soda, still eating all the hamburgers. Next month, I just kept him at that he was doing around 15, 16 hours of fasting. I asked him, could he just have soda outside his home? Don't bring soda inside his home. So we just worked on the soda thread. Second month, 10 more pounds. Third month, still let him eat whatever he wanted, just soda outside the home. He had to add in protein. Still kept him at that same eating window. We didn't even vary the fast, just add in more protein. He lost another 20 pounds. So you're looking at, in 3 months, this man was able to lose over 40 pounds just by compressing the eating window and changing a few habits. That, to me, is the power of what the body does when you just give it a rest, give it a chance to click into this ketogenic system and to heal you. And for women, and back to the women in your life, I actually would suspect that if I sat down with them, or they read the book and we taught them, like, hey, here's the part of your cycle where it's really good to eat more breakfast. And here's part of your cycle, you may notice you're not as hungry for breakfast. And how do we have that natural rhythm with it, that they would start to find that fasting, they would actually crave it at different times of their month.
Okay, if you loved this video, you're going to want to check out the next video of my food series. On this video, want to talk about the healthy foods that you might be eating that will stop you from a long and healthy life.